Search teams battle unfavorable tidal conditions, recovering more bodies as the death toll tops 200, while President Park Geun-hye makes an apology regarding the ferry disaster. Coming home. Once the national seal of the emperor and the symbol of the transition into the Daehan Empire, a priceless artifact returns home. Disaster prevention and swift measures to deal with them once they happen. What could and should be done? And still printing on A4 and 2D, the days of printing objects in 3D are here. We'll get a closer look at a couple of them right here in the studio on Korea Today, Wednesday, April 30th, 2014.
From Arirang News, this is Korea Today.
And good to have you with us on Korea Today. On this Wednesday morning, I'm Kim Min-jung alongside Kim Young and Jin-ju. So yesterday, the families of the victims of the Sewol-ho ferry disaster held a press conference.
That's right. They gathered and expressed wishes on what to do with the donations that are coming in right now and the donations that are to come in the near future. They expressed wishes that they want these donations to be used to establish and build a memorial park in the honor of the victims.
Right, but they did ask to stop all private fundraising activities that have not received consent of the families. And if people want to donate for the tragedy, they said that it should be done transparently through a hotline. And they added that the donation will all be used for scholarship programs as well.
That's right. How noble of them, right? All right, well, despite unfavorable tidal conditions, rescue teams have recovered 16 more bodies overnight, bringing the death toll from the Sewol-ho ferry disaster to over 200. Most of the bodies were found in the lobby on the top 5th level, apparently as passengers tried to gain access to the deck. The latest development brings the number of missing down to a 2-digit figure, a tad under 100. Meanwhile, investigators have found that the crew members of the ill-fated ferry had contacted Cheonghaejin Marine Company, the operator of the vessel, 7 times before fleeing the sinking ship, leaving most of the passengers on board, raising further suspicion that they had neglected their duties. Also on Tuesday, the head of Cheonghaejin Marine Company, Kim Han-sik, was questioned for 11 hours for allegedly aiding the de facto owner of the ferry company, Yoo Byung-eun, and his family with embezzlement and tax evasion.
For the first time since the April 16th sinking of the Sewol-ho ferry, President Park Geun-hye made a public apology in regards to the government's handling of the disaster. During a cabinet meeting held on Tuesday, the president apologized for the government's failure to prevent the disaster and bungled initial response and mishandling of what is quickly becoming one of the deadliest incidents of its kind.
이런 사고로 많은 고귀한 생명을 잃게 되어 국민 여러분께 죄송스럽고 마음이 무겁습니다.
The apology came following the president's visit to the joint memorial altar in Ansan, the city where the majority of the high school victims are from. President Park prioritized continuing efforts to find the victims unaccounted for and ordered a complete overhaul of Korea's safety system, as well as the establishment of a single safety ministry specifically in charge of natural and man-made disasters. Co-leader of the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy, Kim Han-gil, said he hopes Park's apology will provide solace to the people, adding that, along with the president, everyone else handling state affairs, including opposition lawmakers, share the responsibility of the accident.
And in other stories, South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff says North Korea staged a live fire drill near the western maritime border on Tuesday, but that none of the shells fell in South Korean waters. The 10-minute drill involving 50 artillery shells came at around 2 p.m., hours after Pyongyang notified Seoul of the exercise held in waters north of the northern limit line in the West Sea. It was the second time in a month that the North has conducted such drills, with the last time leading to an exchange of fire between the two Koreas. The South Korean military is on high alert as data also show heightened activities at the North's main nuclear test site in the northern area of Punggye-ri.
The Jindo Indoor Auditorium is where the families of the missing have been staying since the first day of the Sewol-ho ferry accident, just waiting and waiting for news of any survivors. But unfortunately, only the bodies of some 200 passengers have been returned to their families as of now. Now, Arirang News has been covering the story for the past couple of weeks or so, and today we have our Connie Lee joining us in the studio to tell us about what went behind the scenes at the Jindo Auditorium and the stories the families had to share with us. Welcome to the program, Connie.
Hey, Chinju. Well, I did stay inside the Jindo Auditorium for the past couple of days. Now, the Jindo Auditorium, it acted as a shelter for many of these families still waiting on their loved ones to be recovered from that ship. Now, Jindo is a rural city about 6 hours south of Seoul, and the auditorium itself is about 40 minutes from Pyeongchang Harbor, or the harbor that is closest to the sunken ferry site. Now, inside an auditorium or a gym, they're supposed to be filled with cheers and fanfare usually, but it was gloomy and you can definitely feel the atmosphere being heavy as soon as you entered. Now, I arrived there about a week after the incident happened, and at this point, there was still a lot of frustration and desperation for more than 100 families who continue to wait for their loved ones to be pulled out of that water. But as the second week approached and as the days progressed, the mood turned more somber. And there's a somber silence now, like a funeral, with a lot of friends and relatives coming in, saying their condolences to these people. And you can only hear the news playing in the front from local media, constantly playing on the screen. Now, this past weekend, it seemed especially tough for the families as it did rain heavily and that not many bodies were recovered. So you can definitely feel a mood change there within the past 2 weeks or so.
Now, talking about the mood change, initially, there were reports of bursts of anger and frustration and confrontation between the families and the officials, but it seems less of that now.
Right, definitely. And there was a statement released from a representative of the family members saying that they do not want the public to feel sorry for them anymore, but they just want those responsible to claim responsibility and to admit it. Now inside, the parents, especially the parents of the young passengers, have calmed down a lot, and they realize that it's not easy for the divers who are still trying to recover the bodies. There's definitely less animosity shown to the search officials, and at one point a few days ago, after a briefing by divers in the search process, the parents of those still missing gave the divers a round of applause. Now, this was something completely different. In the first few days of the search process, there was a lot of, like you said, bursts of anger and frustration shown, and a lot of finger pointing at the search officials. But at this point, it's just pure exhaustion by the families, and they just want this recovery process to be done as soon as possible.
And we're hearing no news about any survivors and more bodies being recovered. Now, what's the process like for the families who get the word of their loved ones being found dead and being recovered? What process do they go through?
Right, inside the Jindo Auditorium, as soon as there's word that a new body has been recovered, there is a slide that comes up on the screen in the auditorium. Now, the screen shows a detailed description of what the body looked like. Now, the details include a number of gold crowns in the person's mouth or explanations of a birthmark somewhere on their faces. So the details are only things like close loved ones or perhaps only a mother would know. Now, at one point, though, this past weekend, search officials did pass out sheets of paper to these family members asking for a more detailed description of their lost ones. Now, identifying bodies are now more difficult as the days progress, and so search officials especially ask for the information on their teeth, any dental information. And so I saw parents calling up their dentist, asking for information on their child's teeth, whether they have braces, how many gold crowns they have, different cavities. And so it's getting pretty nitty-gritty with the details now.
The request itself must have been so brutal on the families, but on the other hand, it must be a necessary procedure to quickly identify the recovered bodies as well. Now, I'm not sure if I can use this expression, but how are the families coping with the news of their loved ones being recovered in bodies, and what were their initial reactions to the news when they saw that they were confirmed dead?
No, I think this was one of the more heartbreaking scenes that I've seen, experienced inside the Jindo Auditorium. Now, the families, when they do hear that their loved one has been confirmed dead, there's a mixed reaction. First, there's a sigh of relief that their bodies have been found and not lost out at sea. And then there comes a point where the parents or the family members are just devastated, realizing that their loved one is confirmed dead. And so I think before that happens, though, there is a slight glimmer of hope. I know logically it doesn't make sense that the bodies or people would have survived, 12, 13 days underwater. Right. But for these families, if they don't see the body, there is a slight of hope still in their hearts that their loved ones could be possibly found. But once that body is confirmed dead, you see parents just breaking down, the family members breaking down. Almost, they're experiencing this death for the first time.
Right. It's really unimaginable to what they're going through right now. But many are concerned about their health conditions. Are they eating well? We heard reports that they weren't able to eat or sleep, but as time progresses, are they managing to have something to eat, or are they getting some sleep?
Right. We do have hundreds of volunteers still making their rounds around the auditorium, and they do have volunteers who actually give out the food to these family members specifically, and making sure that they do eat and they do get the right medication. They are a lot of stress, as you can imagine, and a lot of the physical symptoms right now are from their emotional and mental stress, according to the doctors. So health officials are more worried about their mental states, especially when the families return to their daily lives, and especially for the parents of the young passengers. Now, I did talk to one doctor who said this sort of tragedy is one of its worst kinds ever, and we do have a soundbite of her talking to me, if we can take a listen here.
This latest disaster is unique and really is one of the worst-case scenarios for people's health. Not only were a massive number of people killed, but most of those killed were children, and their deaths were caused by human error. So this kind of pain being felt by the parents is huge and will have a significant impact on their mental health. Unfortunately, though, they are not taking the initiative to take care of their mental state.
Now, there are doctors, counselors, and psychiatrists, about 30 to 50 of them each day, working around the clock in the auditorium. But according to these health officials, the family members are not taking advantage of them. Doctors say that the family members do not think it is proper to take care of their own health, especially when their child is dead. There's also the stigma of mental health problems here in Korea, according to the health officials, with not many people being aware of mental health issues. Now, a huge concern for many of the health officials here.
So we do need to keep an eye on them even after they return home, after the funeral procedures are over.
Right.
Yeah, and doctors and counselors are among the thousands of volunteers that went to decide to offer some sort of help to the families and to give them a mental support as well. So could you tell us more about the volunteers there?
Well, the hundreds of volunteers still remain at the Jindo Auditorium, even though about half the family members are still there. We have volunteers to do everything from washing the floors of the gym to doing the laundry of the family members. They go around asking for dirty clothes, for the dirty underwear, and even cooking and handing out specific foods for the families, especially those who are suffering from high blood pressure or diabetes. And so I do see volunteers asking the doctors, what are the specific foods that these people need? What is their diet? And so we have individuals going home, cooking up specific meals for specific individuals inside the gym. We also have a lot of notes and messages written to these families here at the Jindo Auditorium. And we'd have a lot of visitors around the city and from all around the country who come just to give their support and encouragement to these family members who definitely need it at this point.
We do hope that these families of the missing and the deceased could stay firm both mentally and physically, although it would be unimaginably difficult for them to do so. And we do hope that they know that our hearts and thoughts go out to them. Thank you, Connie, for sharing your story with us today.
Good morning. Let's run through the front pages of your newspapers. Yesterday, the president apologized for the Sewol-ho ferry disaster and offered her condolences to the victims' families. However, many of the families and the public are still very angry. Now we'll look at a top story here on Gyeongyang Shinmun. The headline says, in face of public outrage, an apology comes 13 days later. Now, the paper notes that this was the first time that the president has apologized over the tragedy. During a cabinet meeting yesterday, President Park Geun-hye said she cannot apologize enough for the failure to prevent the accident and for the insufficient way it was handled, including especially the initial response. The paper also reports that there is criticism because the apology came so late, adding that it is questionable whether the aggravated public sentiment can be calmed with such an apology. Meanwhile, on 중앙일보, we'll have a look at this headline at the bottom here. The headline captures a statement coming from the president. It reads, President Park Geun-hye says, I will completely banish bureaucratic mafia practices. Now, I talked about what's being criticized here in the country as a bureaucratic mafia on Monday as well. In this story, it says that President Park sees the disaster as stemming from a combination of long-running irregularities and corruption deeply rooted in many corners of Korean society, such as overlooking safety regulations for the sake of efficiency and collusive ties between regulators and businesses. Now, while expressing deep frustration, she pledged to do her best to remedy such problems and also push for strong reforms in the whole government system, as she ordered a complete overhaul of Korea's safety system. Now let's go to a story of hope here on the 중앙일보 here. And the headline says the teachers were there. And as the subheadline says, this story is about the hope that lingers amid all the sadness and desperation, and that coming from the warm-hearted teachers who have been residing throughout the disaster from day one. The paper says that many of the teachers from Danon High School are still by the parents' side at the Jindo Auditorium, together waiting for news of loved ones. Now, they are doing whatever they can to support the families there, and some of the teachers who are back at the high school are trying their very best to help those students who have lost their schoolmates, when the teachers themselves must also be going through a very difficult time. And moving on to 조선일보, we'll have a look at this headline separately. And it reads, CEO of Cheongjin Marine Company pays Yoo Byung-eun nearly $10,000 each month. As you heard at the top of the hour, prosecutors questioned Kim Han-sik, the CEO of Cheongjin Marine Company, yesterday as the scandal surrounding Yoo Byung-eun, the de facto owner of the company and former Sewol Group chairman, continues to expand. Now, Kim Han-sik is suspected of having been closely involved in the extensive list of wrongdoings allegedly committed by Yoo and his family members, as they found that Kim was paying Yoo $10,000 a month of the company's money, even though Yoo had no position at the company. That meaning $2 million of the company's money had gone to Yoo. And let's switch gears to the economy for a look at this here on the Mail Business newspaper. And the headline reads, Korea should revive domestic demand by letting money flow. Now, these are words coming from Zoo Min, IMF Deputy Managing Director, in an interview with The Daily at an annual Milken Institute Global Conference being held over in Los Angeles. Now, he was giving advice on the Bank of Korea's monetary policy to not raise the interest rate and instead let money flow in the local economy to revive domestic demand. And over on the Korea Economic Daily, we'll have a look at this headline at the bottom here regarding the won-dollar exchange rate. Now, this headline says $1 equals 1,030 Korean won. the strongest in 6 years. So the Korean currency won is gaining ground precipitously against the US dollar, and this raises the possibility that the won-dollar exchange rate could cross below the 1,030 mark to reach 1,020 in the short term. And that was a look at your newspaper headlines for this Wednesday, and coming up are the stock numbers from Tuesday.
Time now to get a check on the weather. We are looking at mostly overcast skies across the country today.
All right, but the conditions at sea near the Jindo Island area have not been faring so well. For more on this, we'll go now to Chun Song-cho. Good morning, Song-cho.
Good morning, guys. Weather conditions around the Jindo Island area are getting better with weaker winds blowing, but the problem is the speed of the currents. Starting yesterday until this coming Friday, the currents are expected to be at their fastest due to spring tides up to 2.4 meters per second at times. This will decrease the visibility underwater, thus hampering search operations. Today's forecast for the rest of the peninsula still calls for precipitation in some parts. The area with the most rainfall is going to be Jeollanamdo Province, receiving up to 20 millimeters until late afternoon. The southwestern regions, on the other hand, are also expected to get some drizzles, not more than 5 millimeters. All of this rain is expected to come to a stop as a low-pressure system over the East Sea slowly heads out eastward today. Temperatures across the peninsula are similar or above the annual average. Today, Seoul and Daejeon's highs are the warmest at 21 and Gangneung the coolest at 14 degrees Celsius. There will be some areas with heavy fog, so please be careful on your morning commute. This has been Chun Song-cho with the weather update.
Time now to get a check on the international headlines we're following at this hour. We'll turn to Eunice Kim, who is standing by at the news center. Morning, Eunice.
Good morning, Minjung.
Now, since Sunday, heavily populated parts of the U.S. have been hit by severe weather conditions, and it seems like there's still more to come.
And in the same regions, no less. It is the start of tornado season, all right, but the severity and length of this first bout is catching many by surprise. Yesterday, some 75 million people were under severe weather warning. That figure has since been revised down to 70 million, but still, we are talking about roughly 1/3 of the eastern half of the country, from Missouri to New York, Michigan to Florida. It's Tuesday evening there now, and since Sunday, tornadoes stretching across 6 states claimed at least 30 lives in its path. The hardest hit states were Mississippi and Alabama, where more than 23 people were killed and hundreds more injured. The National Weather Service says the storm system is set to return to those areas, bringing with it damaging winds, scattered large hail, and a moderate risk of more tornadoes. Tens of thousands were left without power, with the worst of the outages being reported in parts of Alabama and Georgia. Turning to other news now, on the ground in Ukraine, pro-Russian forces have taken over a key government post, this time in one of the largest cities in eastern Ukraine. Hundreds of activists stormed one of the regional administration headquarters in the city of Luhansk with baseball bats and, according to Reuters reports, automatic weapons and stun grenades. They demanded a referendum for greater autonomy, and insurgents have now taken public and security buildings in about a dozen towns and cities. Interim President Alexander Turchinov criticized the local police for their inaction and, quote, criminal treachery. Meanwhile, Ukraine's Interior Minister Arsen Avakov told the BBC that presidential elections slated for next month may not be able to take place in all regions of the country due to this unrest. And let's scoot over to Kenya next, where its President Uhuru Kenyatta has signed a bill that would legalize polygamy. The bill would revise the country's marriage law, which had not allowed men to take more than one wife, contrary to social norms in some circles. But what makes this revision controversial is that it would allow husbands to take more wives without consulting their existing spouses, which also goes against tradition. This was the sticking point that had caused female lawmakers to storm out of parliamentary deliberations. They called the bill demeaning and argued that it would change the makeup, the dynamics of the family, as well as the financial standing of the women. It was opposed by Christian leaders in Kenya as well. And one last point, Minjung, the revision does not apply to women. Women cannot marry more than one man.
Now that raises some serious questions as well. Now we're also watching the U.S. Federal Reserve this morning. They're meeting for 2 days starting Tuesday local time. Any word on what we can expect?
Right. The Federal Open Market Committee will meet for 2 days in Washington, and at the end of which it will release its April policy statement. But by and large, it is expected to continue on its due course, tapering the central bank's monthly bond buying program by $10 billion each month. This stage-by-stage withdrawal of its quantitative easing, of course, began back in December, and it stands at $55 billion now from what it was $85 billion then. The stimulus was aimed at boosting growth by keeping longer-term interest rates low. And that's a wrap of the global stories we're following this morning.
And still ahead, in the wake of the recent ferry tragedy, more people are showing greater concern about disaster readiness. How aware and well-educated are you? We take a look at how people feel about safety education and go over some of the basics with Dr. Kim Byung-ju.
U.S. President Barack Obama's recent visit to Korea not only included bilateral summit with President Park Geun-hye, but also the return of some priceless Korean artifacts. And Im Yoon-hee joins us with more on that. Good morning.
Good morning. So during the Korean War, many cultural properties and artifacts were either lost or stolen, but recently 9 of them have been returned to Korea. Now these 9 are from the Joseon Dynasty and Daehan Empire, and they were supposedly taken by a U.S. Marine during the Korean War who said he found them in a ditch next to a ransacked Toksu-gung Palace. And so he said they were discovered in San Diego, and they have been brought back by the U.S. President Barack Obama himself.
All right, so we'll take a look at this report.
Yes.
This is a symbol, hopefully, of the respect that we have for Korean culture and our friendship.
역사적 임무를 돌려받게 돼서 매우 뜻깊게 생각을 하고 또 오바마 대통령님과 또 미국 국민께 감사를 드립니다.
Although all artifacts are priceless to Korea's culture, one is of particular worth. The Hwangjae Jibo seal, which was the national seal of the emperor, was created upon the establishment of the Daehan Empire in 1897. There was also the Sugang Taehwang Jibo, which was the royal seal of the former emperor Sugang. And it was carved to commemorate a royal right bestowing Emperor Gojong during 1907. And both the Yuseol Jibo and the Junmyeong Jibo were used for official purposes. One was used to certificate appointments of public officials, while one was used to mark educational letters. Now, 5 other signets were also discovered and they were used back then to stamp books or paintings in the Joseon royal court. Now, the seals that were stolen from Korea were used hundreds of years ago to authorize documents in lieu of a signature. And now they're the face of our nation, something we must protect and keep for the generations to come. Although there still may be many yet to be returned, we're lucky to have these 9 seals back in our cultural possession.
So very important artifacts from our history have returned home. Now, I understand that you can't really put a value on this. They're priceless in nature. But at the same time, I do understand that there is a value that's been estimated.
Right, so this isn't the first supposedly stolen artifact to be returned. Last year, there was one seal that was apparently stolen from Queen Moonjung herself, and so this was apparently taken off a shrine here in Korea, but it was returned last year in Korea, and it was actually purchased unknowingly by someone at an auction for quite a sum of money. But these 9 particular seals have been estimated by experts to be worth tens of billions of won, and so you can see it is worth quite a bit, but I mean priceless in terms of our culture and heritage.
And so now they have been returned. What are the plans for them?
Right, so the National Palace Museum does have plans to show them even as early as next month, which is starting tomorrow, right? And so hopefully the public will be able to see those in the near future. And so these actually have been said to be the most valuable items to ever have been repatriated of a cultural heritage to Korea. And so there are still estimated 30 or so signets or seals that are still missing. And so hopefully we'll see those in Korea in the near future.
Okay, well, we do hope they do find their way home as well. But in the meanwhile, people can enjoy viewing these artifacts.
Right.
Thank you very much, Uni.
My pleasure.
Now, many of these priceless artifacts most of us will never get a chance to hold it in the palm of our hands. But with 3D printers, we may actually get a chance to hold a replica. And Angela Park is over there with a sneak preview on some of the 3D printers that we have in the studio. Angela?
That's right, 3D printing. This used to seem so sci-fi and futuristic. It allows us to recreate any object that we want relatively easily. So today for Hot Items, we'll be taking a look at 3D printing technologies that are growing high in demand and the 3D printers that use them that are sweeping the nation.
Time now for news sum up. Many people here in Korea and especially in the city of Ansan have been either directly or indirectly affected by the Sewol-ho ferry disaster.
That's why the government will set up a counseling center in the city to support those who are suffering from acute shock and depression in the aftermath of the accident. Let's go over to our Seo Mi-sorang at the digital room for more details. Over to you, Mi-sorang.
Good morning, guys. Terms related to the Sewol-ho ferry accident are still dominating the online search phrase rankings in what is now day 15 since the accident. Let's see what got the most attention the past 24 hours. Many looked up details on the Biola University students singing Amazing Grace at the Pyeongmokhang Harbor, as well as singer Kim Sang-won singing his new tribute song Yellow Ribbon on a radio program yesterday morning. The government announces plans to set up a trauma center in Ansan, as well as a national safety ministry under the direct control of the Prime Minister's office. Meanwhile, Jeon Do-yeon becomes the first Korean actress to be included in the Cannes Film Festival jury. Now let's go back to the first listing there, the one about the Amazing Grace. The hymn Amazing Grace reverberates through the Pyeongmokhang Harbor. Students from California's Biola University Choir attended a service last Sunday held at the harbor's Salvation Army tent. Some 40 students visited the area to offer their condolences and pray with the victims' families. The university's president Barry Corey was also there and said that he couldn't imagine what the families must be going through and that he would pray for the precious children lost. The choir sang Psalm 23 in Korean, as well as an a cappella version of I'll Fly Away. When the students sang Amazing Grace at the end of the service, victims' families, government personnel, and volunteer workers alike were deeply moved and tearfully joined in singing the well-known hymn. And as we keep seeing time and time again, people from all walks of life, all nationality, and different religions are united in praying for the victims and their families. Moving on to our next issue, help is on the way for the residents of Ansan, the city most affected by this tragedy. Let's have a look. A psychological treatment center will be set up in Ansan within the year for those suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. According to the Ministry of Health and Welfare yesterday, the exact budget for the center is in discussion, but the center will most likely be a permanent fixture in the city as symptoms of PTSD can rear its head up to 10 years after the traumatic incident. Under the plan, a team of around 20 psychiatrists, psychologists, and therapists will provide treatment to the residents,
as well as visiting local schools and operating an emergency call center. The Ansan Trauma Center will be the first government-run institution set up in response to a specific incident. The Gwangju Trauma Center, treating those affected by the May 18th democratic uprising back in 1980, is operated privately. In response, many online users supported the change, but some expressed concern over whether money will dry out just within the first few years of its operation. That's it for today's News Sum Up. I'll be back with more updates tomorrow.
And good morning to you all as we kick things off with some good news in the LPGA. Now, after claiming her first LPGA title as a pro at the LPGA Swinging Skirts Classic, 17-year-old Lydia Ko moved up 2 spots in the latest world rankings. With the Korean New Zealander now with 9.42 points in the latest ranking system, she moves up 2 spots and is now ranked number 2 in the world. With an impressive season so far, the teen is able to take over Suzanne Pettersson for the spot. Meanwhile, after finishing tied for 4th place over the weekend, Park In-bi holds on to her top ranking for the 55th straight week, just ahead of Lydia Ko. And moving over to badminton, where Lee Young-dae is set to return to competition after getting his 1-year suspension lifted by the Badminton World Federation earlier this month. Of course, with the Incheon Asian Games coming up in about 5 months, Lee Young-dae will quickly get ready for competition as he's set to compete for the first time at the Thomas & Uber Cup in New Delhi. With the event taking place on May 19th to the 25th, he'll be competing in the men's doubles event as he's set to leave to India on the 15th. And now moving over to basketball, where the South Korean men's national basketball team's head coach Yoo Jae-hak released his 24-man preliminary roster on Tuesday. And it looks like size won't be an issue for the team as big man Ha Seung-jin is set to return to the national team now that his mandatory military service is over with. The roster also includes just one half-Korean player in Moon Tae-jong with a packed point guard roster, which includes Kim Tae-sur, Kim Sun-young, and even Kim Min-gu. And now going into Tuesday night's KBO action, the NC Dinos hang on to beat the LG Twins 3-2 with the SK Wyverns absolutely crushing the Kia Tigers 18-5. Meanwhile, let's take a look at the Tucson Bears take on the Nexen Heroes. Of course, going into the game here, starting pitchers on the night, 2 Americans squaring off with Chris Volstead on the mound for the Tucson Bears and Brandon Knight taking the mound for the Nexen Heroes. But the second inning, men on second and third, Kim Jae-ho flies out to right, tagging up is Hong Seung-in, and it's 1-0 Tucson. Next inning, men on first and third, Vinny Rotino, RBI single to right, ties the ball game 1-1. Fourth inning, Lee Sung-yeol grounds one to second base. Oh Jae-won goes home on the plate, but Park Byung-ho is safe at the plate, and it's 2-1. Next play, Moon Woo-ram grounds out to short here. Scoring is Kim Min-sung, and it's 3-1. Bottom of the inning, bases loaded chance for the Tucson Bears, and Hug Young-min draws the walk, and it's 3-2. Fifth inning, more from the Nexen Heroes. This time, Kang Jong-ho with an RBI single to left. Rotino scores, and it's 4-2. Next play, here is Kim Min-sung. This time, he singles to left field, and that's an RBI single. And that's your final score, 5-2, Nexen Heroes. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day, and see you guys again for your sports needs.
During an emergency, the utmost priority is saving lives, and knowing just what to do within those first crucial moments can make all the difference. Dr. Kim Byung-ju joins us with more on proper response. Good morning, doctor.
Good morning. Good morning. Yesterday, President Park Geun-hye offered an apology to the Korean people for what government has done and has not done with regard to this terrible, tragedy that we have been experiencing so far. The thing is, however, looking forward and moving forward, what really matters here is, in order to prevent this kind of tragedies from happening whenever again, it's all of us, every single one of us who has to actually look around where we live, where we work, and where we commute to prevent and think about actually any kind of possibilities of this kind of terrible accident in the future. So that's what we are going to go over today. And let's take a listen to some of the citizens who are talking about how much they know about what to do in this kind of emergency situations.
I don't know very well. I actually don't really know what I would do or how to respond during a big disaster.
Before the recent incident, it all seemed like someone else's problem, but now I fear that it could actually happen to me too. Not something simple. I hope there are lessons teaching us what to do in case of an accident like this.
Now, we talk a lot about 안전 불감증, how there we are indifferent or oblivious to the dangers around us. But it's not that we don't worry about those things. We just don't know what to do and would rather not think about those
Exactly.
accidents.
I mean, it's human psychology not to think about terrible possibilities. We want to kind of like look away, turn away from those kind of possibilities. Number one, that's human psychology. Number two is also opportunity cost. Korea is such a busy society. We have a lot of things going on here. And it's not very attractive to think about these kind of possibilities that has a extremely low probability. So we don't have time for this. That's what we've been doing so far. But obviously, it's time for us to change with regard to that kind of old habit here. And what we need to do is train ourselves better and inform ourselves better and educate ourselves better to have a so-called better future, moving on away from this kind of tragedy.
Okay, we saw some of the interviewees interviewed at subway stations. Let's start out with the public transportation system. Now, it's been about 11 years since the Daegu subway fire that took the lives of many, but subway safety has also seen a significant increase in safety and prevention.
Indeed, hardware-wise, we have some pictures prepared here. Let's bring it up on the screen here. Hardware-wise, we have prepared a lot of stuff. For instance, in almost all subway stations, we should bring up the picture of the subway station here on the screen. We have all this, almost everywhere in subway stations, we have these gas masks and fire extinguishers.
We're looking at the pictures of the arson incident, right, in Daegu.
That was 2003 Daegu incident. There was a terrible incident where a lot of people have lost their lives. But since then, as you can see on the screen here, gas masks and fire extinguishers, and even the flashlights and emergency phones and emergency equipments we have at this kind of train stations everywhere. We even have ladders that people can use to go down to the railway if there is a terrible emergency situation, moving away from the platforms and all that. And inside, we have these screens that explains all these safety measures and all that. And also inside the cars, in each and every one of them, we have different kinds of safety measures and equipments where you can use, which you can use in the case of emergency and emergency phones and all that. So the main point here is that we have a lot of hardwares that have been prepared in place ever since that terrible accident or experience years ago.
Right, you're right. But it's important that people also know where these emergency equipments are located and how to use them properly.
Right, to use Korean terminology, hardware themselves don't create miracles here. Software matters, meaning what people know in our head in terms of what to do, what we are going to do when we face situations, emergency situations. So it's critical for us to get to learn, what to do in this kind of emergency.
So as individuals, being educated on what is there for you in case of an emergency, knowing all that and all the options is very important. But we talked about public transportation, and most of the Korean population, many of them at least, live in apartments, high-rise buildings, and fires do occur in these areas as well. And it can be very tragic if a fire does break out in an apartment building.
Right. To be clear about this, Korean modern apartment buildings, they're very well, fireproof, pretty much in most of the cases. But still, we have added a lot more of the safety measures to minimize damage from the fire. Let's bring up the pictures about these apartments and their innovations about what we have prepared for this kind of tragedy here. Ever since, for instance, 1992 July, the law requires for apartment housings to have a so-called lightweight drywall that separates one unit from another on your balconies. So if there is a fire, you should be able to break those light firewall and escape to the next unit. So that's one thing we have in place. And also, we have, the law has been requiring since 2005 to have a separate space for emergency shelter if there is an emergency, fire emergency. And a lot of people have actually been blocking this kind of spaces, emergency spaces and all that for their storage uses. But now it's time for us to change that kind of old habit and have those kind of facilities.
Some people just might not know that it's even there.
That's actually true indeed, right? So we have
This is another nifty function that's being installed in many apartments these days, right?
Right. This is a new advanced design of this kind of shelter.
Like a panic room almost.
Exactly. So.
Right. Well, these fires, you can prevent them with extra caution, but these natural disasters, they are unpredictable and you cannot really do much about it.
Right.
And just recently, in this month, in fact, a magnitude of 5.1 earthquake shook the coast of Taean. It was the third strongest earthquake, I believe. And many experts are saying the Korean Peninsula is not free from earthquakes anymore. But I believe many of the buildings, though, they're not earthquake proof.
The thing is, government has been making its earnest efforts to advance all these designs, making them earthquake proof. And the effort has been made, and we have made about significant progress of making all of 30% of our buildings earthquake proof, and the efforts continues on. So people should cooperate with those kind of public policy efforts right there. In addition to that, of course, we have the climate change issue here. Because of all these changing climates, we have heavy rains and all that. Government is spending much more on that front to build all these facilities and infrastructure to make the society safer in the face of this kind of natural disasters.
Okay, so let's move on over to transportation of a different kind, vessels as well as we saw the ferry disaster, vessels as well as airplanes. What kind of safety measures are on there and what kind of disaster, I guess, response measures are on there?
Well, actually, we have a whole bunch to make ourselves get acquainted with, I suppose. We have all different things, but let's bring up some of the visuals about the earthquake first to move on to the transportation here. We have earthquake exercise video that you can see right here, little kids here, and they're learning what to do. Of course, when the earthquake strikes in Korea, first thing to do is to cut off gas and electricity to prevent any possibility of fire, to be clear about it. And also, rather than moving out of the building, you should first take shelter under hard facilities and equipment such as table and cover your head first, and then move on when things get stabilized, right? And of course, as young, you have asked different kind of guidelines in order to prevent future tragedies. These are the points about preventing accidents when you're taking a sea line or taking ships here. Different points to keep in mind for sure. And also we have different points about what to do about building fires and all that. We do, of course, know all these points. The thing is, they're saying these days, we gotta make sure that our body knows these kind of points rather than our brain knows in case of emergency. So the training and drills are more important than ever before. In Korea, we have about 11 different places all around the country that's called the public safety training centers. You can take your kids, children, and yourself and get yourself acquainted and well prepared this kind of emergency situations.
Okay. Also drills, regular drills held by schools around the country. We do have them, but we should increase the frequency of them.
Absolutely.
And also, teach them how to use the certain safety equipment that we do have lined up.
For several decades in Korea, we have had civil defense drills.
Right. I remember ducking under the desk and
that's
holding our nose.
Yeah, that's what some people, including myself, believe we have to go back to. A more intense fire, this kind of emergency drill, so that we can be prepared for all kind of possibilities and all that. All right?
Okay.
All right, Dr.
Thank
Kim.
you, Dr. Kim, for your time this morning.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
time for hot items. Today, we're going to look at 3D printers. Exciting stuff.
That's right. They're not just your average 3D printers. There's some for the home as well as industrial 3D printers. And we'll take it over to Angela Park and Peter Bint. Good morning, guys.
Good morning. Yes, 3D printers. This is like so futuristic sounding, but we have it. It allows you to print or recreate objects that you want relatively easily, like I said earlier. Now, this technology is being touted as something that can revolutionize the manufacturing industry. In fact, it was one of the most emerging technologies of 2013 at the World Economic Forum.
Yeah, that's right. 3D printers these days, they don't just print sample products, they print items that can be used practically in your household, and even in some instances can print food these days. So local governments here in Korea, they've been focusing on the 3D printing market domestically to compete internationally and gain a market share of around 15% by 2020.
That's right. So today for Hot Items, we have locally produced 3D printers with their own independent technologies trying to make headways into the global market. So, shall we start?
Yes, let's start with you.
Mine is a little bit bigger because it is more of an industrial usage 3D printer, right? This is from Korea, which is actually the nation's first 3D printer making company, and this is called Master Eve.
Master Eve. And I believe that these products on the desk next to that printer are all made by Master Eve.
That's right.
The detail on some of these is amazing. I could almost wear these as actual ski goggles.
We just need to put the rubber band, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's relatively easy to use. Like you said, Peter, it uses, it's very detailed. It's very, diverse shapes.
Yeah.
It uses what's called digital light processing, DLP method for printing. And shall I show you how exactly it's operated?
Sure, I would like to print. Is it not too difficult to operate?
No, it's actually a lot easier. I was a little bit scared too because it's kind of big, right? But you need the USB drive. And once you have that with your 3D modeling file, you plug it in like so. And then it's a touch screen on the screen. I'm going to open it up. So we have our file that's saved, if I could get my finger to work this. And then there's one that says Peter and Angela. So that's the one we're going to open.
Okay.
And then all you have to do, this is 작업 시작, which basically means to start the project, the printing project. Now,
and that's it.
It's printing.
That's fantastic. You mentioned earlier DLP technology to print. What does that mean?
Okay, so digital light processing, it uses a projector to project an image of the cross-section of your item into a vat of photopolymer. Now you're thinking, photopolymer, what is that? It's a light reactive type of plastic. So wherever that light shines on, it selectively hardens, basically layers each individual layer of the object. Little by little, will stack up to form whatever it is that you want to create. And this is great for practical uses such as, for example, dental implants, dentures, medical parts, machinery parts, not to mention if you have extra detail that goes in, because of the layer by layer, it allows for much more smoother and detailed sculpting that as long as you have the appropriate design, you can actually even create jewelry as well.
Fantastic.
And just put maybe an extra coating, for example, depending on what object it is you want. So as our viewers can see, a lot of practical usages.
Yeah, so you mentioned the layer by layer technology. So what are the advantages of that? And is it not expensive, the material that you're using?
That's a great question, because photopolymer, it sounds very high tech, it sounds expensive, and it can be pretty pricey. But the key with this layer to layer thing and the key with the light selective hardening process is that wherever the light doesn't shine on, whatever's not used is reclaimed, and that way you can use it for your next 3D printing project.
Oh wow, so it's recycled, whatever is not used. That's great.
And the layer by layer, it allows for relatively speedier printing time as well, because it doesn't matter what shape it is, it's layer by layer, right? And so that's also nice as well. Like I said, you can basically, the sky's the limits for what you want to create.
So what are we printing here though?
Great question. If you take a look behind me, it's actually a 3D photo. If you look carefully, I don't know if our viewers can make it out in a little bit, but Karima has a patented photo developing technology. So it takes 2D photos, it adds like the base and the relief. If you shine the light, you can see that this part sticks out more and this part's, so it gives it a 3D feel.
Yeah, you can see it on the camera, but in real life, it's really clear and like 3D, my eye is actually popping out there, just like in real life.
In real life, there we go.
Yes, that is amazing. A 2D image made into a 3D photo. Okay, My printer that
Yes.
I've brought for you guys today, I'll step this side. It's much smaller, as you can tell, and the demand for these printers is also increasing a lot because you can use them at home. They're much cheaper as well than the industrial ones. So this is Almond, made by open creators here in Korea.
It's so cute and small.
Yeah, so it's not only spatially very, very compact, it's also very mechanically convenient. So that means you can use it at home, but it's also won a design award at the Red Dot Design Awards in 2014.
I'm scared, but to hear the answer, how does it work?
FDM, that's fused deposition modeling technology method that creates the modeling, and it's in process at the moment.
Okay, so I'm scared again. What is FDM?
So it uses these thermoplastic filaments, which basically are hard to start off with, then they're heated up to their melting points, and then what comes out of the nozzles here is basically liquid plastic as a continuous thread, which is built up, and then the 3D object is made.
I noticed these are all the products that this printed, right? It's so colorful.
Sure, so whatever color plastic filament you use, that's the color that comes out. So you can print in pretty much any color you can imagine.
Okay, so what are we printing right now? It looks like a chess piece?
Yes, you're right. So this is what we're printing. It's a chess piece, and it's nearly done now. Hopefully by the end of the show it'll be finished and we can have a game together.
I'll beat you probably.
Probably.
But all right, so you explained how it works, but is it easy to operate as well?
Yeah, it is easy to operate, and you don't need a computer either. All you need for that was a USB over there. Here it's just an SD card with the image already on it. Stick it in the slot, and you're away to go.
There.
And there's a bed leveling process, which is the first one, and that's just to see that the platform is level, because if it's not level, then all the printing will be wonky. So that's the first step, and this takes care of that very well.
So once it's leveled, then it starts printing, and then you're done, right?
Sure, the plastic just melts, comes through the nozzles, and it can use different types of plastics, and it's fantastic.
Well, from what I hear, the
Guys,
nozzle's
I have
also
a
great because
burning question there. Is that banana a real banana or is that a printed banana?
No, this is a printed banana. Obviously, you can't eat this one, but it looks like a real
Now,
banana.
if you could come out with the
Printed by the
technology
printer.
to really print an edible banana, that's when I'll be interested.
Young, you'll be the guinea pig for that.
All right.
Win
Details
the
are
Nobel
amazing.
Prize for that, right?
All right, Angela
Thank you,
and Peter,
guys.
thank you very much
Thanks
for
a
joining
lot.
us today.
That's all we have prepared for you on this Wednesday morning.
Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you back here tomorrow morning at 7 a.m.
Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.